We're just going to look at the first few verses of Psalm 38 because David is dealing with failure. He's dealing with sin. And there's a lot of implications of that sin in his life as there is in our lives. And so in the first position, let's read the first three verses together. He says, O Lord, rebuke me not in thy wrath, neither chasten me in thy hot displeasure. Now, I want to begin here. I want to say it is so very important that you have a proper theology, a proper framework of the wrath and the anger of God. First of all, it is not irrational or unjust, okay? You need to understand that. We tend to think of anger as emotion, human emotion. Then we put it in the category of out of control human emotion. And then we put it in the category of unjust or injustice. We've all experienced that. We've probably all been that to some degree because our human anger is so interwoven with our own sin nature, and anger becomes something that is unholy and impure when you mix it with sin. Okay, but Ephesians teaches us to be angry and sin not. So there's a way to keep anger and sin separated. And in that view, anger is something very different than what we typically think of. Okay, anger is purity defending purity. Okay, it is purity exercising justice. It's not emotional, so it doesn't go up and down. It's not irrational. It's not out of control. It's not reactionary. No, none of that we typically equate with anger. Anger is simply justice in action, okay? And so, now the beautiful part of this reality as New Testament believers is that we don't face the just anger of God that we deserve, okay? Because Jesus faced it for us. And so in the sense that anger is the meting out of justice or punitive reckoning or punishment, we don't face that because Jesus faced it for us. But David here is talking about rebuke and chastening. And that we do face because rebuke and chastening is not just the expression of harsh emotion or punishment. It's not that at all. Rebuke and chastening are correction and nurture. It's putting me on the right path. It's growing me through my failure. So let's begin here, okay? Let's begin here that David knows that wrath, knows that rebuke and chastening or hot displeasure is not something that's going to destroy him. And he knows that it's not something that causes him to lose God's love or favor. How does he know that? Because he's coming to God, okay? He knows he's still, even in spite of his failure, he knows he still has a road to God, a source of communication to God. He knows he still has mercy, an entrance in, a hearing with God, a reception, a welcome, if you will. That's why he's praying. So whatever we think of the wrath or the displeasure or the rebuke or chastening of God is something like a stiff arm, like God's rejecting us, or like maybe when you were little, your parents said, go to your room, you had that sense of rejection, which even that wasn't right. But in a cosmic, God-scaled view of these things, we tend to think of wrath and displeasure as something absolutely destructive, fire and brimstone and eternal separation from God. And in this sense, it is not. Now, when God brings about final vengeance, final justice, final reckoning, final justice, final judgment, and pours out his ultimate, the sum total of all of his wrath on all injustice and sin, yeah, that's going to be final. And it's going to be it's going to be explosive. It's going to be fiery. But right here, this is a different thing that David's talking about. He has He has fallen, and he is experiencing that fallenness. He is experiencing the outcomes and the wounds that his sin has brought. And so he's asking God to deliver him from that, from the wrath, the displeasure of the rebuke and the chastening, the unpleasantness. He's repenting. He's saying, God, it worked. The rebuke is working. The chastening is working. Can you remove this? Why? Verse 2, because your arrows are sticking fast into me. I'm getting it. They hurt. I know I need them. They're sticking. They're there. Your hand is pressing me sore. It's heavy. It's becoming unbearable. There is no soundness in my flesh because of thine anger. David is panting after God. He wants to be right with God. He wants to know that God is finishing his correction with David. And there's nothing wrong with that. Now, he's surrendered to God. Obviously, he understands that God is the authority. He's not accusing God. I want you to catch that. He's not accusing God. He's owning his own sin. He understands that God is dealing with him justly, fairly, reasonably. But he nonetheless sees God as a loving, merciful, long-suffering, gentle Father who can even bear the complaints of the weight of bearing God's correction. Look at verse 3. There's no soundness in my flesh because of thine anger. I can't sleep. I can't get out of my mind. My mind won't stop. It's eating me up, essentially. Neither is there any rest in my bones because of my sin. You see the distinguishing. David knows he's owning in true repentance. Repentance owns its own responsibility for sin. But he's asking God for that sweet fellowship and sweet communion to return. And he's going to God, who he knows to be loving and gentle and long-suffering in it all. I just think this is a beautiful 3 verses. It's nobody's life verse. It's nobody's favorite verses to memorize. But if we could get the essence of these verses, that God is a loving God, in that he would never have a child that he doesn't correct and rebuke, especially when that child is self-destructing. But he never intends to break us or reject us. He always intends to grow us. We are always in his favor in that sense, always. You're never not in God's favor, even when you're in his rebuke or correction. So take heart, my friend. Respond well to your failures, because God surely is, and he loves you more than you know. Happy Tuesday. We'll pick it up here tomorrow. Have a great day.